Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named Available Ferret in the Am I Wrong subreddit. The post is titled, Am I Wrong for Being Upset? My GF of 8 years now wants sex. My girlfriend and I have been together for 8 years and we've never had sex. My girlfriend has had some issues regarding sex. She's gone to a therapist and realized she may never want sex. I knew all of this beforehand, and I was willing to stay sexless as she's a wonderful person. I've never pressured her for sex and never expected it. It was hard for me at times though. Also, non-monogamy was never an option. Fast forward a few years and my libido is completely gone. I don't engage in any sexual activities. I don't even masturbate or watch porn anymore. Even if a sex scene comes up in a movie or on TV, it does nothing for me. Any sex drive I ever had is gone. Recently, my girlfriend tried to grab my crotch and I pushed her away. I asked what she was doing and she said she wants to try to start being sexual with me. We had a long talk about why she feels this way and she said she can't really explain it. I told her I don't want to have sex and she was disappointed. Things have gotten more tense between us and the other day we had a fight. She says that I'm just doing this to punish her because she wouldn't have sex with me before. She claims she doesn't believe me when I say my libido is gone. I'm just really frustrated with her now because I was willing to give up sex to be with her and I never made her feel bad about it. Now she's upset with me. Am I wrong in this? User Fits Pleasure Vibes said, she says she doesn't believe me when I say my libido is gone. What does she have to say about you being understanding of her issues regarding sex for the last 7 years? Sounds like main character syndrome. I don't know, man, but good luck. To this, OP said, she said it's different because she has some trauma regarding sex and that I've never been sexually assaulted. User Direct Alternative said, no one is entitled to suddenly have sex, especially when she said she was never going to have it. Now, what I'm curious and kind of sad about is that you've gone years, almost a decade without sex. Not because you wanted to, but because she didn't want to. And now, because she suddenly wants it, she expects you to just go along with it. It's an extremely selfish mentality for her to think of you as a light switch that she can turn on and off for her own personal preferences. Geez, and she didn't even talk to you before grabbing you? Man, this situation sucks. User Specialist Concerned said, couple of things, your feelings regarding sex are valid and she should respect them. Get your hormones checked by a doctor. Consider couples therapy. Update, we had a talk. I explained to her what I did to get rid of my libido. She didn't know this, I never told her because I didn't want her to feel bad for not having sex with me. I didn't want to share it, but she insisted on knowing why I don't have a libido anymore. She started crying when I told her. She said she was sorry she made me go through that. I told her it's not her fault and that it was my choice. We just held each other for a while after that. We decided that we'd go to couples therapy and when I'm ready, I'll see a sex therapist. She said she's sorry for how she's been acting and that she's willing to be patient with me. I asked her what happens if I never get my libido back. She said she doesn't know, but she will be patient with me. So yeah, I'll try to get my libido back. I don't feel comfortable discussing it now, but something I'll want to mention during therapy is the pressure I'm feeling from my girlfriend. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it feels like she's waiting for me to have sex. I don't know, when I decided to be with her, I was more in the mindset of I may never have sex again. I wasn't waiting for my girlfriend to get better so we could have sex. I accepted the fact that I could go sexless for the rest of my life. I don't know, I guess this is a discussion for later. Edit, I think a lot of people are assuming I beat myself up. No, I didn't punch myself at full force. I slapped my thigh or my hand or pinched myself whenever I got horny or tried to look at porn. I did not punch my genitals. Final update. It's been a long time since I posted and things have changed a lot in the past few months. We found a therapist for us as well as one for myself. It was hard to open up. I felt like I wasn't allowed to be frustrated a good portion of the time. I did manage to open up to my girlfriend. Honestly, it was a pretty arduous journey for us, but we are in a better place now. My girlfriend recognized that she was wrong for pressuring me into sex and grabbing me out of nowhere. I recognized that I was wrong for my self-therapy when it came to suppressing my libido. We took small steps toward having sex, and eventually we finally did. The first time we tried was a mess. Eventually, though, it started to feel natural. We'll still go to therapy, but we are both in a much better place now, and we are having sex pretty consistently. I honestly didn't realize how much I missed it. User HottestYSA said, honestly, this update is so refreshing to read. It's great to see a couple willing to work through tough issues together rather than just giving up. The fact that both of you took accountability, found therapy, and took small steps toward intimacy is really inspiring. Relationships are hard work, but it sounds like you're both stronger because of it. Wishing you both continued growth and happiness. User Melted Turtle said, this is an amazing update. Congratulations to both of you for overcoming these tough challenges. Wishing you all the best and lots of fun. To this Slim Jim said, I don't think they've overcome these challenges yet. Basically, she spent years conditioning him to be how she wanted, then suddenly decided to change. It sounds like there was another guy who suddenly moved away. He stayed with her, and she might not be willing to do the same if his libido, which she conditioned, doesn't come back. This next post was made in the entitled Parents subreddit by a user named Dinosaur Paladin. The post is titled, My crazy father assaulted me over a casserole and he got away with it. So this is something that happened to me a long time ago, and it's something I've debated putting on a platform like this, but I've decided that people need to know how horrible my father is. This is something I've told close friends before, and this is the first, but certainly not the only, horrible event regarding my father. Please note that this is the farthest back I can remember. Context. I am a 28-year-old male turning 29 next month, and this took place when I was very little, either 4 or 5 years old. At the time, my parents, my younger brother, and I were living in a small town close to family members. My dad worked a job, and my mom was a stay-at-home wife. During this particular day, my mom was running errands with my grandma and brought my brother with her, so it was just my dad and me. A coworker of his was camping at a nearby campground that we frequently visited when we lived there, and my dad decided to get the camper trailer and camp out that weekend. We arrived at the campground and I was invited to play with the other kids, including the 2 boys of the coworker who were either my age or a bit older than me. There was a nearby creek that was a popular swimming area for the kids. I bring this up because I loved to swim as a kid, and my dad strictly told me not to get close to the creek because he didn't want me swimming just yet. However, while I was playing with the kids, I ended up tripping on a rock and tumbling into the creek, getting completely drenched. I was and still am a great swimmer, and the creek wasn't really deep, so I wasn't in any danger, but I was afraid my dad would be mad. The coworker's kids were willing to vouch for me that I fell in by accident. We went to my dad's trailer, and sure enough, he immediately got mad, yelling at me that I wasn't supposed to go swimming. Although this is the farthest back I remember, I know that even then I was scared of him when he was mad. I ended up being quiet because you couldn't say anything when he was angry without making the situation worse. The 2 boys fulfilled their promise to try and defend me, telling my dad it was an accident, only for him to tell them both to scram as he dragged me inside. I was tossed into the bathroom with a towel and some dry clothes and told to change quickly. I did so without saying a single word. Even after I did what he told me to do, he was still fuming. We were going to the coworker's trailer for lunch, and my dad threatened me that if I screwed up one more time, I'd regret it. At the coworker's trailer, lunch consisted of some kind of casserole. Like many kids, I was a picky eater, so I had already decided I wasn't hungry. But it took one glare of pure anger from my dad to get me to start eating. Within a couple of bites, I started feeling nauseous and put down my fork, saying I was no longer hungry. My dad flipped out. He immediately started screaming at me to eat every bite of the casserole and said that I wasn't leaving that spot until I did so. The coworker, bless his heart, tried to mediate by saying that I didn't have to eat if I didn't like it and that he had no problem making me a sandwich. My dad told him to shut the fuck up and threatened to punch him if he said another word. For the next 5 minutes, I sat there bawling my eyes out while slowly eating the casserole as my dad screamed right next to my ear about how he was going to beat the shit out of me if I didn't do what he said. On my 4th bite in, my stomach turned and I fell off the chair and threw up. I felt him grab me by the hair and drag me back to the trailer while I wailed for him not to be mad at me. It's worth noting that my parents were the type of parents who had a wooden paddle for spanking. However, at that time, it was only my mom who used it because she had enough restraint to ensure that I didn't feel anything more than a slight sting as a way of getting her point across for why I was in trouble. My dad proved he had zero restraint as he yanked my pants down and swung his first blow. It was an agonizing strike so strong that it made me immediately stop crying and feel numb. It felt like he smacked all senses out of me. He swung a second time and then everything went black. The rest of what happened comes from testimony from my grandma since I was unconscious for 2 hours. While I was getting struck, my dad's coworker called my mom in a panic, telling her to go to the campgrounds immediately, fearing for my well-being. My mom and grandma immediately drove from their destination, a little over an hour and a half away, to the campground. Unfortunately, my dad stormed out after striking me several times in blind fury and threatened to beat the shit out of the coworker and his kids if they ever mentioned what they witnessed. The coworker fled. I don't know if my dad attempted to hurt the coworker and his kids, but considering how bloodthirsty he was, I wouldn't be surprised. My mom and grandma pulled up to see my dad sitting on a chair in front of the trailer, still fuming. He immediately told them both that I got what I deserved and that I was making him look bad. They both went into the trailer to find me face down, pants off, with the bottom of my back to the upper half of my thighs nearly black from bruising. My mom thought I was dead, and it took my grandma finding my pulse to discover that I was still alive, just unconscious. My grandma floored it to the town's police station, while my mom stayed behind to make sure my dad didn't try to hurt me any further. That's when I regained consciousness and saw my grandma driving off. The thing is, my dad had no remorse for what he did, even saying that he couldn't care less if he killed me or not until the cops were involved. He went inside and laid out a sob story about how he didn't mean to hurt me like that and that dad always loves you, bud. Being the innocent kid I was, I believed him, but now I know it was just a lie to relieve himself of guilt. I wish I could say that he went to prison and I never had to deal with him again, but that wasn't the case. My mom did have plans to fully divorce him and press charges against him, but when she visited him in the county jail, he thoroughly convinced her that she couldn't afford the divorce and that my brother and I couldn't survive without him. He also laid it on thick about how she would be a social outcast for being a single mom. He made it clear that even if she managed to get her kids away from him, he would not rest until he killed her and took my brother and me to where nobody would ever see us again. My mom tried to remain brave, but the threats worked, mostly due to how he showed no remorse over what he did to me. He was just upset he got caught. So my mom dropped the charges and continued living with him until I was turning 11. However, the whole family was well aware of what he did, and they made it clear that if he ever hurt me like that again or harmed my mom and brother, they would not hesitate to call the cops. The only thing this managed to do was make my dad much smarter about how to abuse us. He focused more on scaring us and making us feel like we were unloved accidents with his words rather than bruising us with his fists. When he did physically hurt my mom, brother, or me, he did so in ways that could be covered up. As for how he is today, he's not as physically aggressive as he used to be, but he's become even more heartless and unfiltered with his words. He continues to believe that he does no wrong and even has the right to hurt his kids, even now that those kids are adults. I have much more to say about the terrible things this monster has done, and I might share more about what he's done in my life. But for now, I just wanted to express how he assaulted me over a fucking casserole and how he managed to get away with it. User Calidora Black said, and this is why parents should not be allowed to choose whether to press child abuse charges after they have been reported to the police. Ever. To this, OP said, agreed. The worst part though is that after my mom and dad divorced and my brother and I were forced to live with him, he did a similar thing to my brother for standing up to our dad's BS. Once again, charges were dropped, though in this case it was because he managed to convince us that he would hunt us down if we were honest with CPS. So sadly, we lied about the event when questioned. User Realistic Noise said, I just hope that you're not in contact with this psychopath. I'm sure that when he becomes feeble enough, he'll be thrown into a home, but I think that's too good for him because he sounds like he enjoyed beating the hell out of you and your family. Has he continued to try to threaten you, or have you actually stood up to him since that incident? Have you told him that if he tries anything, he's going down? He sounds like someone who would back down quickly if confronted by someone bigger and stronger than him. User Inspector said, and I mean, never lift a finger to help this person. If you ever get the chance, make sure he knows he's dead to you. Also, if it were me, I would wait until he's old enough not to put up much of a fight, and I'd find him to get some revenge. Let him know what it feels like to be powerless. Update. I felt like sharing more about my entitled father, specifically the 6 months I lived under his roof. Context, by this time I was 19 years old. I had sadly dropped out of college within months of starting due to a variety of problems, mostly stemming from depression and stress that wasn't helped by my mom trying to tell me what to do. I ended up moving in with my dad, who at the time had no internet at home. I worked as a cashier at a restaurant chain in the nearby town. I would say things were rather uneventful, but he made sure that wouldn't be the case by being his usual entitled self. Some of his behavior was brief and typical, like him screaming at me for doing anything leisurely instead of working 24/7, or belittling me for trying to start drawing as a hobby. Here are some of the extreme things he did during those 6 months. One of the first things he did was shortly after I got my job. Things were going relatively well at work, despite one woman who found me just as pathetic as my dad did and some customers calling me the R word for making mistakes. However, as is typical for a part-time job, I wasn't working much and wasn't earning that much money. I had a talk with my boss about my hours, and she mentioned that on some days she would send me home early if there was no business, but she said it was something she had to do. When I told my dad, he wasn't happy. He told me I had to make her give me more hours. I explained that if she said she couldn't, then she couldn't. Suddenly, he punched the wall right next to me and gave me the glare I've come to recognize as the "I'm going to hurt you if you make me angrier" look. At that moment, I was scared for my well-being. He told me that now that he had scared me, I would be willing to do whatever he wanted to keep myself safe. He then went on a rant about how real men get what they want by making promises to hurt and kill. You hurt and kill those who stand in your way. You hurt and kill those you don't like. You hurt and kill those who hold you back. If you don't do that, son, then you're not a man. You're a mistake. Although I didn't tell my manager what he did, I did inform her that he might come to her angry once he found out she had to send me home early if business was slow. She simply said that if he did so or if he bruised me, she would call the cops, and she told him that directly. As punishment, I was suddenly given rent that cost most of my monthly paychecks. Next is how I almost died from his negligence. He's one of those country folk who heats up the house with a furnace, you know, those big cube-like iron things that are like a combination of a fireplace and heater. Well, on this particular day, I had a night shift and my dad was going to be out of the area until very late due to work. My grandpa offered to take me to work and back. I was enjoying the day to myself, doing what I wanted, watching whatever caught my eye on TV, drawing, playing games, etc. By the afternoon, I found myself oddly sleepy, so I decided to lie down on the bed and close my eyes for an hour or two, just enough time to recharge before a potentially busy night, so I closed my eyes. I was shaken awake by my grandpa, who looked absolutely relieved that I was conscious. In my blurry state, I heard an alarm going off, and he had me grab my work clothes and phone before taking me to his house nearby to help me clear my head before changing and going to work. What had happened was that the furnace had not been properly cared for, and there was a lot of gunk blocking the pipe leading outside, causing the house to slowly but steadily fill with carbon monoxide. It didn't take long for me to feel better once I was able to breathe clean air. Although I was a bit woozy, I managed to work as much as I could. It wasn't a long shift, about 3 or 4 hours, and my grandma was the one who picked me up. She said my dad had gotten home not too long ago, and they managed to clear the carbon monoxide from the house pretty quickly. My grandpa was scolding the hell out of my dad. Sure enough, when I got home, my grandpa was furious with my dad, and to my surprise, his sister was also there, scolding him as well. However, he was not once remorseful over what happened. He was annoyed that they were getting on his case. Even when they tried to hammer in the fact that there was a chance I could have died, he simply scoffed, "Well, he didn't, so stop making this a big deal." Thankfully, I moved out of his place very quickly. A few months after the carbon monoxide incident, my job unfortunately burned down due to an electrical fire. I had the choice to either carpool to the next nearest location 40 minutes away or find a different job. I chose the latter, and my grandma offered to move me to her town since there were far more job opportunities there than where I was living. Of course, my dad was not happy about that. He accessed my account and took a huge chunk of money. His excuse was the rest of this year's rent. My grandma tried to find a legal way to get the money back, but since it was a joint account, we were told he technically hadn't broken any laws. While I was packing up to move, my dad constantly told me how much of a disappointment I was, how I was the reason my parents got a divorce, how I deserved all the abuse and bullying I received, and that nobody liked or tolerated me. My grandma did put him in his place, but that just escalated to where he told me he wished I had been a miscarriage. Although I regret not talking to my grandma about cutting him off then, I had no idea back then you could even do such a thing. That was the beginning of me slowly going low contact with him, only talking to him whenever necessary. This last story was made in the relationship advice subreddit by a throwaway account. The post is titled, "My husband accused me of murder out of the blue. How do I salvage this? This is long and ridiculous. Sorry. My husband, Luke, had a sister, Laura. We were all close and saw each other 2 to 3 times a month, along with their parents. Almost 6 months ago, Laura fell down the stairs at their family home and died. It was a freak accident. There's a window on the half landing and she hit her head on the sill. I was the last person to see her. I was there for less than 10 minutes and she was in her pajamas making coffee. I didn't even stay for a drink, and I struggle with how such a brief and seemingly meaningless interaction could have been her last. She deserved so much more. My husband and I have only been married for a year, but we've been together for 4 years and have known each other for over 20. When Laura's parents found her, they called my husband straight away and we rushed over. We faced the whole thing as a family. In the days that followed, Luke started quizzing me about exactly what we talked about, what she was wearing, where we were standing, etc. It progressed to him saying I was providing conflicting information and accusing me of withholding information because I couldn't tell him things like what pajamas she was wearing. This escalated quickly but lasted for less than a week as I lost my cool and made it clear that I was done answering questions. He didn't bring it up again and I wrote it off as a grief quirk. His behavior was generally that of a normal grieving person. Last Friday, he outright accused me of murdering her in front of his parents, out of the blue. We were all stunned. There had been an inquest that recently concluded, and there was never any doubt that the verdict would be accidental death. He said it was completely obvious, and he couldn't believe that no one else could see it. He claims I went through his phone and found messages with Laura and that I confronted her, which led to things getting out of hand and me pushing her downstairs. By the end of our conversation, he was shouting about going to the police to get the inquest overturned and how I wasn't going to get away with it. Let me be clear, Laura and I had a great relationship. We all did. I have no idea where this has come from other than these messages I haven't seen, and even then, I don't think there's anything I could ever see on someone's phone that would drive me to murder. It's just ridiculous. He's been with his parents since this happened and will not talk to me at all. I've had some contact with his mom, but she's not being very communicative. The last I heard, she didn't know what messages he was referring to either. I am still completely stunned and I have no idea how to proceed. I made a commitment to be there for him always, and I understand that grief can manifest in strange ways, but part of me feels like my love for him died the second he called me a murderer, and I don't know how we could possibly work through this. I also really don't want to be thought of in this way, and I have no idea if he has said anything to people we know. I obviously haven't. A brain tumor or psychotic break has crossed my mind, and I suggested it to his mother. She just said she'll talk to him. Other than the questions before, he hasn't been acting oddly. Obviously, he's been grieving, but he seems sane and sensible other than this incident. I feel like I'm going mad. Does anyone have any advice at all? User Morale Tax said, "No, you don't salvage this, you get a lawyer and get the out. Best case scenario, he has just admitted to sending messages with his sister that he thinks would make you angry enough to kill her over them. I have some ideas about what those might be, and they're all bad. How did the parents react when he did this?" User Wonderful Prior said, "You need to get a lawyer to protect yourself in case he does go to the police. I would write down everything you can remember about what happened that day and keep it just in case. He may be having a psychotic break. As stated, don't talk to him, his immediate family, or your friends without someone present, or preferably communicate by text or email. Save everything. You need to take his accusations seriously and cover your ass." To this OP said, "I was interviewed by the coroner's office after her death as I was the last person to see her. She died about 3 hours after I saw her, and by that point I had been to the supermarket and was home. It's all verifiable and was part of a recorded interview. I haven't spoken to anyone but his mother, and that's only been over messages. She's never been a big texter, but she has seemed very cagey over the past few days. I don't know if this means she's seen the messages. I've asked and have been ignored. Update. I'm in a bizarre and complex situation with my husband. I have broken the law and I feel I have no choice but to do so again for my safety. I don't know what type of solicitor I need or what the next steps should look like. We're in England and I'll try not to editorialize too much. My husband's sister died suddenly at the start of the year. Her death was an accident and there was no suggestion to the contrary. The inquest was recently concluded and a verdict of accidental death was returned. I was the last person to see her, but her time of death, which was almost immediate due to her injury, was confirmed to be hours after I had left the house. All of this was verified at the time. In the immediate aftermath, my husband behaved strangely and kept trying to trip me up about my story of the last time we saw each other, which was a brief interaction. Last week, he outright accused me of murder in front of his parents. He says I saw his messages with his sister and confronted her, and that he's going to have the coroner's decision overturned and have the police investigate. I haven't seen or heard from him since. I posted for advice on Reddit, and it has spooked me, quite reasonably I think, but it also led me to commit a crime and plan another. My husband's iCloud credentials were saved on an old iPad in his office, and I downloaded his backup last night. I have read all of his messages with his sister, and there is absolutely nothing like he describes. I understand this is illegal, and I'm concerned about the possible ramifications. I am also waiting for a call back from a locksmith to change the locks on the home we own together, which I believe is also against the law. So this leads to my actual questions. I feel justified in what I've done for my safety, but is there a degree of pragmatism under the law for these issues because of the situation, or am I shooting myself in the foot? I'm resigned to the fact that my relationship is over, but his parents don't seem to be taking this seriously and they're icing me out. I believe this is a serious mental health issue that may put people, namely me, at risk. Can I do anything about this when all I have is the fact that I'm being accused of murder? I feel he needs to be detained and this should be investigated as a full-blown psychotic break. Sorry, this is all a bit mental. In addition, what type of solicitor do I need? My understanding is that a coroner's decision can't be appealed. Is that correct? Are his accusations going to go anywhere? Can I protect myself from this or stop him from escalating to telling others? We live in our hometown where everyone knows everyone. This could follow me forever and it's either a lie or a delusion. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. Firstly, thank you to those who helped me access my husband's iCloud backups through an old iPad. I wasn't expecting much from Reddit, but I received valuable practical advice before my post was locked and I appreciate it. There were no crazy or even suspicious messages. I searched for over 100 terms and scrolled back through years of conversations. I saw a side of them both that I wasn't expecting, but nothing that explains the claim that I murdered Laura over their chats. There was nothing to suggest he was cheating and absolutely nothing to indicate incest. I repeat, no incest. There were no weird gaps where deleted conversations or a switch to another app would fit, just siblings making plans, sending memes, and gossiping. They said unexpectedly horrible things about a few people, but not about me. It was a sort of relief, but it raised more questions than it answered. I sought legal advice also from Reddit after posting here. It turns out my options are to divorce him or sit down with him. I contacted my community mental health team who said they'd reach out but made it clear it wasn't urgent. I then called his mom and said that if I didn't hear from him by this weekend, I would get a solicitor and ask for a mental health assessment as part of the divorce. In response, he made a ridiculous post on Facebook and everything blew up. I'm going to try to keep this succinct. On Friday night, he made a long accusation on Facebook with new information. He claimed he'd been planning to leave me for months with his sister's support, that I found the messages and that I murdered her. He stated that the coroner has reopened the case and that the police are preparing to arrest me and he needs to make sure people know before the trial stops him from talking about it. It was well written and seemed vaguely plausible. He messaged people links to his post, so it got some attention. We live in our hometown and have a large circle of friends because we've been here all our lives. People I haven't spoken to since school were reaching out to me asking what was going on. It was madness. In response, I posted the export of his entire conversation history with Laura on Facebook. I linked to the chat along with a post explaining my side and noting that I had changed my ex's iCloud and Apple passwords. I stated that if he wanted them back, he should comment on my post and update his own, admitting that he was lying. He eventually did. When I started getting messages about his post, I panicked, and changing his password seemed important to preserve everything because he'd know I had access. When I spoke to him the next morning, it was clear he wasn't having a mental episode at all, but was claiming one because he had been caught in a big lie. As soon as he was outed, he called me, clearly drunk, begging and promising to explain everything if I deleted my post. I hung up and told him to call back the next day. He did, and he tried to bargain and guilt trip me with his mental health until it became clear that the wrong people people had seen his conversation. It's hard to describe, but it seemed fake. It was too well rehearsed, and then this morning, when it was clear he was getting nowhere, he blocked me. Begging for mercy and reciting facts about mental disorders doesn't align with someone in crisis who sincerely believes that someone murdered their sibling. The question of why he did all this remains unanswered, and he will not be getting his passwords until it is. The legal advice subreddit said this behavior is technically illegal, but it's unlikely a court would take action, so I'm going to count on that because I felt like I had no other choice at the time. And now I don't see any other way to get answers from him. I am desperate, and it's all I've got. So there we are. The relationship I believed was my destiny since I was a teenager has boiled down to petty, convoluted, and vindictive bullshit played out on social media for reasons still unknown. My hope for a brain tumor is fading, and clearly tomorrow morning is when I'm going to lawyer up and stop posting about this. I am mortified. I have no idea whether some people might believe him, and I still don't know why this all happened in the first place. Sorry I don't have a happier update, and thanks once again to everyone who offered advice. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and thank you also to partner of the channel, Gamersubs. Use code DLAM to support the channel and get 10% off of your purchase, link in the description. I'm sure many of you like me have a hankering for daily caffeine, so go check them out. Lately, I've been a big fan of Titty Milk and Acid Rain, but they've got dozens of other flavors for y'all to try out. Anyway, thanks again for reaching the end, and I hope you all have an amazing passage of the next 24 hours.